What were the leading indicators to get you to dive deep into this?
Why is it that every year the Minister for Mines or the Minister for Steel, or the head of like a major Indian coal company comes to Queensland and screams as loud as they possibly can and tells every politician and every journalist that Queensland needs to make more coal. We need more met coal and we need it fast. And we need it ages ago. Like, that kept on happening. Second thing, every met coal producer that I've met that's, say, ex-Australia, particularly like US groups, all of their growth over the last 5 years has been Indian tons.
This is general advice, my opinions, and for entertainment purposes only. CFDs are high risk, past performance isn't reliable. I may be long or short CFDs and stocks mentioned. Content may contain language that offends some viewers. Righto, punters. An old dear friend of mine, not that old in person, but old in friendship, the great man, the brain himself, Dylan Kelly, DK from Terra Capital. Mate, welcome to LEVRD, because I hear while you've been eating your chicken tikka masalas and your beef vindaloos each night, you've been using that as inspiration to look at the rise of India and much else.
Certainly have, mate. Very happy to be to come back into your new surroundings.
Thank you very much, mate. I ran into Mr. Matthew Langsford in front of the Paragon the other day. He looked like a tradie. He wasn't dressed like a normal fundy, but mate, and he threw you under the bus as the new Indian guru, the rise of India and what the impact this has on global mining and commodities. Mate, take it away. There's been plenty in the news. I want to see what you've uncovered.
Oof, mate, that's a pretty good wrap in terms of a startup. Well, first of all, my name's Dylan and last name's Kelly, which unfortunately is very Irish and not very Indian at all. So my level of expertise and cultural understanding of that part of the world is low, but we've been spending a lot of time there and looking at a lot of data sets. So what's happened, or why the hell do we care, Matty, I think is the question we're all trying to ask. Something's changed. Now, as you know, the boy who cried wolf tends to sort of lose its appeal in terms of its importance over time. And for at least a decade, maybe longer, India's been sort of like that boy who cried wolf economic story. Like, we all know, massive population, big area.
Gonna replace China. That was the next China.
Bingo. Chindia was the name of the whole. There was a whole series of note titles. It was a joke. But every visit that had that there back in the day, all of the economic data, for lack of a better term here, mate, like, the country just didn't quite have its shit together in terms of what we care about, which is that raw material consumption rates. Like, I remember visits where we had reports of, say, Australian coal getting essentially landed on the east coast of the country back in the day, but by the time they dumped the coal, there was nowhere to unload it. And when it was unloaded, it was like guys with wheelbarrows trying to move things around, and then wheelbarrows to little trucks and rickshaws, and then trying to get it to a steel mill. Like, it just didn't quite have it together. But something's changed in the last 2 years, and from what we can tell, we're not going to say it's like China 2.0, but what we're going to say here is that the settings have changed to set it up to be a key driver for incremental demand for a whole series of different units. And as opposed to China of the past, its sort of uptake on that, say, S-curve of development is going to be a lot different, and it's going to need different things, but we're going to start talking about it a hell of a lot more. But the problem is, like with all developing countries, mate, at the beginning, it's really hard to get a read on it. Remember China, like, I remember trips back there and say, like, 2009, 2010, like, that was pretty hard yards. Like, most of the places you went to, there was no real nice Western hotels to stay in. No one really spoke English. It's hard to get translators around. The data was shit. Well, the data's always been terrible.
Doesn't sound accidental, that.
Well,
I think they wanted it that way for you Westerners.
correct. I don't think that's changed. But it's like you get such a big country that's grown up so quickly. I mean, of course, there's no real way, there's no real good stats on the place. I don't know if you've ever come across it, but some of your punters on the line might remember uh, companies like Dragon Economics and China Reality Research out of a few different brokers. Like they were the ones that were better, like they were trying to figure out how to measure some of this stuff. And they were the sort of the early adopters in terms of trying to get people to measure or count the number of rail carts arriving at port, picking up, shipments of this, that, and the other. Trying to measure, how many people are actually sort of moving to these towns and what was the urbanization rate was. And it's really hard as a foreigner to figure these things out. And we had this funny experience, 18 months ago, where we started looking at pollution maps again. So one of my more recent visits, I had this immediate sort of flashback where you walk out get the elevator down in your hotel to the lobby, and the first thing you see is like a television screen that tells you the air quality of what's outside in terms of that monitor. Now that's kind of like my sort of like light bulb moment in terms of saying, oh, we're here. I remember this. I can feel the sulfur in the back of my throat sort of burning a bit. But there's all those different little hallmarks along the way. It's like, okay, the air pollution is now, worst on the planet. The second thing is where all that air pollution's happening is in places where you don't think there's anything going on at all. So it's a bit like Southeast China on the mainland, like in maybe Tianjin. That's a little bit closer to Beijing, but even certain areas there, like there's a hell of a lot going into the place. There's all these people, there's all this activity, and there's like lead particles flying around, and you can sort of like from different government embassies all over the world, like that's the indication that there's activity. But you wouldn't necessarily know if you looked at like whatever the nation capital stats are saying, because they don't have a way of measuring it on the ground. Or the different provinces are so discombobulated and scattered everywhere, there's no way of measuring it in a cohesive way to get a bigger picture of things.
Because is India, like what changed in India for this to start happening now? Like, as you said, did they just get their shit together? Was it a political side? Because they're obviously getting a lot more active with international engagement around mining and commodities, it appears. Okay,
so if I sort of whittle it down into the list of things that have changed. So number one, like what was the catalyst here? So it's boring and it's political, but let's just call it Modi and his party. You can go look up all the details, but essentially they consolidated power in a certain province, and that went federal. And that party managed to bring together all the different regions and the provinces together under sort of one sort of focus and one pillar. And progressively through a series of policy changes, they managed to get the investment setting right. What do I mean by that? The ability to get cash in or out, the ability to transact with foreign currency without problems, the ability to use US dollars throughout that system there, rule of law, standardize, so free trade agreements in terms of how foreign countries interact with the country in terms of like contractual rights. There's like a long series of different things that have occurred over the last 15 years, or ever since Slumdog Millionaire was sort of on screens, to suddenly get things around. Now, you bring it all together. What does it mean? The setting is right to see a prolonged series of incremental demand coming for raw materials. What do I mean by that? One of the elements that I found really interesting is the infrastructure spend. Now, what I mean by that, I had the story before about a bunch of rickshaws and guys with shovels and wheelbarrows moving, sort of Minimax or Panamax vessels at port, trying to move it, by hand to steel mills and whatnot. That's now changed. They've gotten really quick and really efficient and built a series of like first world airports, ports, you name it, up and down the country. And they've spread it not just in a couple of big tier one cities, it's even across the whole continent. Here's the weird thing that I kept on picking out. Like with China, we always focused on like Yeah, China, Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen. There's like all these tiered cities, and everything seemed to like aggregate at like a couple of different handful of spots. There seems to be this policy setting where they're trying to spread it evenly across the different provinces so that no one's sort of like it's not all concentrated in one spot. It's like even the poorest provinces getting equal sort of allocation of infrastructure spend. And so that's like a leg of it. The second leg of it is this notion that if you the agreement to build the infrastructure was explicitly tied to an agreement with industry that in exchange for building this stuff, you need to go out and start building the manufacturing or the industrial capacity that is required to use it afterwards.
Yeah, so now we're getting to the crux of it.
Exactly. So it's not just train lines and roads to nowhere or cities with no one to live in them because a policymaker had done it. It was hand in glove with industry for what they need to make their businesses work or their to fix a manufacturing problem or a supply chain problem. And it's interesting. So I think that's
So where is that at? Because I'll say two pieces to this. There's developing their downstream manufacturing capacity, and then it's what they're also doing is securing the minerals and the metals and commodities to supply these. So where's the downstream at the moment?
Okay. So I think the short answer is we don't know because if we get to our end of the market, or let's call it midstream, is at the national level, you can get some stats, but the national level, they're essentially trying to aggregate all the data from all the different provinces, which are as far-flung as you can imagine, and trying to get one single source of the truth is impossible. The only thing we can find is data on, let's call it, there's a lot of coal that's sent from Queensland to an island in Indonesia, which has got a whole series of coke ovens set up. And from that one province in Indo, all of the coke that essentially most of the steel mills require on the East Coast, you can see at the provincial level where that's going. And you can sort of see volumes in that way, sort of give you a sense of what the blast furnace requirements are right now for imported coal. Like, I think that's kind of like the underlying elements for it. I think, okay, I mentioned it before, but there's like, if you go to the US embassy website in, say, the top 10 cities around the world and China or otherwise, and they'll always have like a pollution indicator and they'll put in, or there's like a satellite feed that comes through that can measure pollution controls in certain areas. Whatever we know, whatever we think we know about the data, there's something else bigger happening because the map is blowing up in terms of huge amounts of like smokestacks and industry going on and lights in areas where on paper that no one's there, no one's living there, and nothing's happening. So whatever it is, it's already happened and it's moving now. But exactly how they're coming to market is hard to map. What we can understand here is like where the infrastructure meets the seaborne market. So where there are the bigger ports with the bigger like deep water ports with capacity and, foreign vessels being able to sort of dock there and actually unload cargoes. That's where I think we're probably going to see and understand it first rate. But the real news and the real information is probably going to be, in some isolated provinces somewhere where we don't know too much about it. And that's what's probably going to drive the incremental unit demand. And trying to map that, well, I think we're going to have to figure that out the hard way.
That's why you've got a job, mate, because no one else would want to do that except you. You're a legend. You're the most employable man in Australia at the moment.
Well, mate, one of the great things about this job is for every one night you get to spend in like a nice city with clean air and beaches and like first-rate hotels, you got to spend at least 60 days in a complete shithole, stuck in some sort of donga in the middle of nowhere, looking at a core farm or third world city. I mean, it comes with the job, right? Places you visit but never want to take your family to.
Well, if you're going outside of Australia to search for minerals, there's a good chance it's either going to be a shithole, humid, snowing, or there's not many good options leaving here, mate. I'm sorry.
Exactly right, mate. And they're never easy to get to. It's like, oh, I got to get a 72-hour flight to somewhere and then drive on a ute for 48 hours across crappy terrain. We've all heard stories. We've all probably done them ourselves. So this is the fun of the job.
Now, before, because the question we're all wanting to, the answers we're all wanting to know is not know or have a guide of, is getting to the point of saying, right, what commodities and are most exposed to this if it starts going bananas. But before we get to that, DK, I want to know what were the leading indicators to get you to dive deep into this? Because we're seeing, like, for example, recently Canada signed the uranium offtake deal with India. India was actually in the news yesterday of pulling out of a lithium deal with Rosatom in Mali, which you wouldn't have thought makes sense. Lithium and Rosatom, the national Russian nuclear company, but they're involved. But obviously there's been plenty happening prior to that. Go through it. What perked your ears?
Okay, mosaic theory. So my view of India was very much through the lens of Slumdog Millionaire. Chindia articles written 15 years ago about how much of this Asian tiger is going to rise, and it's going to be like a super cycle all over again with China 2.0. In this instance, that hasn't necessarily petered out. Growth has been slow, but it's been sitting somewhere up in the high single digits and approaching in certain instances in some provinces, particularly where Modi's from. It's been in the low teens for a couple of years. So we get the policy setting right, and something weird has happened. So there's the three key signs I had for it were the following. Number one, why is it that every year the Minister for Mines or the Minister for Steel or the head of like a major Indian coal company comes to Queensland and screams as loud as they possibly can and tells every politician and every journalist that Queensland needs to make more coal. We need more met coal and we need it fast. And we need it ages ago. Like, that kept on happening. Second thing, every met coal producer that I've met that's, say, ex-Australia, particularly like US groups, all of their growth over the last 5 years has been Indian tons. Like, we're talking stuff that comes out of the Mississippi Basin, gets on a boat, and travels all the way from like the US Gulf Coast all the way to India. The third thing, why is it that it is somehow economic that India was going to import coal from Mongolia and pay for a shipment to go via the Trans-Siberian Express, go all the way over through Russia and then down through the stands, and then out at a port in Iran, then get loaded onto a boat and then sail into India? Like, what does that tell you? They want coal and they need coal. So unlike China over the last 30 years, what India has in buckets in terms of mineral endowment, it's iron ore. What they don't have is coal. So you think about it through the prism of what we need in terms of like your industrial capacity of any country that's growing and burgeoning. You need a shitload of steel. And in this instance, oh my God, they got some endowments there of iron ore, and they sure as hell don't need us. So if you think about ERISA, go back and have a look at some of your textbooks or some of your annual reports for Rio. It was BHP back in the day, I think, had deposits in and around ERISA. They've got big, high-grade deposits of hematite, of pretty good spec, actually above. I've actually come across a business there that might actually be the sexiest iron ore business I've ever seen, because it's vertically integrated into a steel mill right next to it, and it's producing something like 44% lump. It's one of the lowest cost producers I've ever come across. And yeah, it's going to start competing with Chinese steel mills in terms of its economics. So that exists at scale. What do they have? No coke. They got to import it. They got to use other nefarious means. So in terms of coming to market, that's a big one. What they don't need is thermal. They've got a shitload of that, but it's mostly low spec, high in organics, crappy material like a 3000 kcal, like ridiculous levels of ash.
So like half the kcal of Newcastle coal.
Yeah, just crap. But the build out of capacity there, massive. and they've got huge swathes of the country have deposits.
So I
there's
suppose it'd have to be massive to get the energy because it's so shit. You need to put a lot more in, I would imagine.
Correct. So you hit the nail on the head there, mate. What are they going to need? Energy. They got a huge modernizing country, industrializing very rapidly, and urbanization taking place at the same time. So they're going to need every single molecule of energy you can think of: oil, gas, unconventional, uranium, bloody novel technology uses. Like, they'll probably be at it, and they'll need every single ounce of it. So that's another big sort of element that we're a bit excited about. Exactly how it's going to play out, I'm not sure. But yeah, thermal's going to do most of the heavy lifting. So yeah, if everybody's a little bit scared about how much carbon emissions a single mine in the Hunter Valley is going to emit, well, just you wait what they're going to be building out over the next couple of years in terms of 6-packs of Gencos just getting rolled out left, right, and center. Oof, we haven't seen nothing yet.
Is there potential for that to be a thermal coal demand as well? Because their thermal coal's so shit and they're growing, they're going to just rather import higher quality thermal coal, or they'll just stick to the dog shit they've got?
Well, like, if it burns and it makes energy cheaply, like, who cares?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I was kind of thinking, like, remember how Adani and what they did up with in Carmichael was sort of like one of the cases of saying, like, how does this work? How is it going to be economic to get a landlocked, like, stranded asset to somehow be economic to truck it all the way to, one of the power plants on the, I think it was like the west coast and the east coast of the country. And the only way it was going to work was if they were entirely vertically integrated, like effectively pit to power point. Like, who knows if that's ever going to be achieved? But I mean, the spec of that was terrible, and they've somehow managed to make it work.
Yeah.
So, and if they're desperate for it, well, they're just going to go anywhere there is capacity for it. So, yeah, Australian, US. But I mean, the real focus for me is, like, where are they going to get the coke from? So looking at those trade volumes, you can get a sort of sense of what's happening in terms of what's coming out of Queensland, filling the void in terms of some of the semi-hard and some of the semi-soft spec, as well as some of the better sort of met coals.
Yeah.
Sort of getting treated in some of those big Indonesian coke ovens.
So, and because how do you view the build out in India? Do you think they're going to become a China on an export basis, or it's all to fulfill their own internal demand for everything? What's the end game, or a mixture?
The answer is I don't know. But I mean, over the last 18 months, how many stories have you read about a reshoring function happening for, say, like Walmart or Costco, building manufacturing base somewhere in some province you never heard of, or city or state, to do something to make, little mini refrigerators and things like that? I mean, I kind of think along those lines, but we just don't know about what's happening on the ground. I mean, it's a big country, huge population. I think it's probably going to be all of the above. Like, labor costs are relatively, like, a hell of a lot cheaper than most parts of China now. So you'd say it's probably going to be a bit of column A and column B. What I tend to focus on is, like, where are they at in terms of consumption and manufacturing of that raw material, like sort of S-curve stuff. So, like, aluminium per capita, copper per capita, energy per capita, and what that curve, what that inflection point is for a couple of those. So here's one story for you that's got me barred up about the economic potential over the last 6 months. So India as a culture has a massive affiliation with gold. Like, you used to put a gold bangle on your missus as, like, your piggy bank.
All the houses are fucking made out of gold.
Well, not the ones I've seen.
The rich ones anyway.
Exactly. So you used to have your bank account essentially on your wife's wrist, and every time you needed the cash, you just used to get some guy to break it off, or a blacksmith to maybe plug it off, and the way you went. So you have this huge sort of, like, gold endowment within the family. It's like a family heirloom, and it's sort of kept within the house, and it's like a thing. So the price rise that we saw in the last year for gold meant that there was over $3 trillion in additional sort of, like, household wealth created on the back of that, like three with a T, in US dollar terms. And that's created this, consumer demand boom unlike the likes I've seen we haven't necessarily come across before. So everyone's going out and buying TVs and cars and white goods and all that sort of stuff. It's so big now that I think it's just under 20% of total like consumer loans is now secured against people's like household gold. Like someone actually comes out and verifies you got the gold or you got it sitting in a safe somewhere, and you can sort of borrow against that holding. And that's been part of the way in which people have been able to realize some of the gains there. So I know, I just thought that was interesting. So there's a bit of a wealth effect. Like every country that's suddenly become rich, they're buying all the stuff that everybody else wants. Basic appliances, consumer goods, little cars. I think the world's cheapest tin car was like $1,500. I think Tata made one. It's like a 2-seater. Probably second you turn it on or play with it somewhat, probably just crumples in itself. But I don't know what you get for $1,500. But yeah, they're very, very, very early on in terms of that adoption curve on every commodity you could think of, steel in the works. So in my mind, the fact that they start talking so early about mass transit and like high-speed rail, that sort of makes me think we've got to start thinking about manganese, because they're going to need a hell of a lot of longs in the steel make to get all that happening. I'm kind of thinking that because a lot of reshoring is already starting to happen and they're already pretty big in terms of like alumina consumption, like the bauxite alley play is probably there. Because they've got to do a hell of a lot of grid build out on the infrastructure front. Copper has got to go. This copper is sort of like first order of magnitude. So, but I mean, like with all these things, like the advent of China growing up and emerging as it did meant that there was a hell of a lot of different moving parts. It was mostly a big steel story, but it turned into almost every facet of the industry. This time it's going to be very different, like culturally and geographically where all these things are. But I'm kind of the lowest hanging fruit here for me is like met coal, copper, alley, and we can probably get down the exotics at some point.
What about rare earths?
Oh,
your basket of pleasure. Speaking of pleasure, sexy and hard-ons.
Oh, mate, we're above the bloody price floor. At spot prices,
three digits, $100 a kilo.
Exactly, on seemingly no news, and no change in the supply situation. Isn't that a funny thing? I'm yet to tune in and start reading up what the great Rare Earth Observer says about the situation. But it's awfully funny to see a price spike in the commodity when the country's just about packed up and gone on for Lunar New Year holidays. So they're taking the Christmas break at the moment.
Spodumene did the same thing.
True. Actually, there's a whole bunch of random stuff that's actually just made out like bandits recently. So, and that's the China landed price. So in my mind, the timing is curious. I mean, it's one of those commodities where whatever you hear in terms of the news headlines today or tomorrow and the next week, whatever it is, it's wrong. Something else has happened on the ground that you yet to really understand, and it might take a little while. And through like dual translation services and some obscure sort of sources of intel, you'll finally find out, there's like a border crossing failure, or there's like a civil war broken out in Myanmar on the border somewhere, or there's some sort of bun fight that's happened between Beijing and Thailand, and therefore ionic clay transport is just sort of ground to a halt. It tends to be little things like that. But this to me seems very unusual, both in terms of the demand picture that we've got right now, and just the timing of last year's price floor with the DOD and MP is sort of, I don't know, it just looks a little bit suspicious to me. And let's face it, you can very easily sort of swing from the rafters in this commodity because there's just such little intel to actually form a view on.
Uranium. you would say it's the most liked and hated. It's liked on the story, hated on the stock market this week. It's such a weird commodity. But, and they obviously, because I mentioned before, India signed the deal with Canada for uranium offtake. Mm-hmm. And uranium is that in the world at the moment, it appears that everyone besides China and now potentially India are sort of sitting on their hands, waiting for something to happen, someone to do something. Like the latest action is obviously NNC buying the stake in the Etango mine for Bannerman, and Bannerman's been hammered for it because it looks like they've given away the stake too cheap. Is India potentially, on the back of that Canada deal, going to be something to consider for the uranium world, that they might start getting involved to secure future pounds? Because it seems like everyone else is just playing chicken with each other.
Well, as I mentioned before, India's going to need every molecule of energy that it can possibly get its hand onto. Even novel concepts and novel reactors could be tested in this case. So I don't necessarily have any particular angle to lend on where and how this is going to happen. What I can say is that I was very disappointed with the ABC's reporting last year on the Four Corners program when they went and scoured the earth for nuclear reactors that are going to be built in the future. They went to the world's most expensive place with the next generation technology and looked at those reactors and said, how expensive is this, and how much are citizens of the good state of Georgia going to suffer through these calamities? But they completely forgot to mention that one of the world's poorest countries, Bangladesh, on the eastern side of India, actually not even 12 months before then, it announced its plans to actually roll out a series of, I think it's like Kazakh and uranium, Russian and I think Korean reactors in their backyard. Now, if they're going down that path with their economic backdrop, I think that probably tells you a lot about what their appetite is for this type of or what the developing world is expecting in terms of their own power requirements and the sources that they're looking to.
Alternative, I'd say.
Alternative. Yes,
mate, trust me, you have to see what happened at Nifty. India likes doing things cheap, if possible.
Well, yes, and don't we all love the stories that came out of that? And also a certain Tasmanian operation and the corners that were cut there. How to sterilize an ore body in short order. It's not a good track record.
Very, very interesting, mate. So I think we've landed on what have we got? Met coal, manganese, and Ali is your more high conviction things to look at for the India narrative. Do you think there's going to be a bit of a dick swinging contest that? And I think it's probably already started a little bit, like Trump trying to say, we'll deal with you if you don't buy Russian oil, I think it was, and I assume the same for coal. Like, is that's going to be a bit of a, what would you say? India might become a bit of a pawn, but maybe progressively become on the back of the row.
Well, let's face it, everyone's kissing Modi's ass to the nth degree. Like, if Modi can come to Sydney, pack an audience out and have the Prime Minister wax lyrical about him being the man and sort of lauding him, I think everybody's sort of queuing up to have a piece of this. In my mind, the story's there. It has been for a while, but last 2 years, something's changed. The stars have aligned and it's set up pretty damn well to grow. Exactly how and when it's going to occur is really hard to tell. From a geopolitical perspective, I don't think this is a country you really want to piss off. Like, you want to be friends with them. And let's face it, like, I find like one of the great things about visiting that part of the world is that they've got this concept of like guest is God. Like, they're actually welcoming and they're friendly. And they speak English. And
especially if you're a cricketer.
especially if you're a cricketer. And we share, like, I don't know, I don't have culturally that much of an affinity to them, know too many, but for some reason I can just talk cricket with those guys for like hours on end. And like, we know each other's players, like we know who's who in the zoo in terms of who's on the start, like who's in the 11 lineup and batting order. Like, I don't know. It's a better place to do business, and I'm happier to travel there than certain third tier cities and parts of China.
Well,
So,
better than, yeah. Well, I got nothing in common with the Chinese besides I love their food, love a garlic combination. But I can't talk cricket or anything general. But man, I can relate to India. We can talk cricket for hours.
exactly, and they all speak English, so that also helps. Not to say that I had that many bad experiences. Or actually, yeah, everyone has bad experience in China at some point. But at least they're a little bit friendlier to Westerners coming through that are keen to understand the country and what's going on. So yeah, it's something different.
Very to finish off, mate. Out of those three commodities that you're looking at, here's a chance to talk your book if you want. What's your likely favoured exposures? Met coal, manganese, and aluminium.
Oh, look, I think let's have a look at the book actually. What do we like out of this? So I don't think we're aggressively positioned to benefit from this on a shorter term basis. This is more like a 18 months to 2 years long term sort of play. I think on a copper level, that's probably where we've got most of the exposure. I think for us,
which is not just India, like that's a sort of a global narrative as well. I understand.
Although we heard the other day that there was a big new copper smelter built in India not so long ago, and they turned it on last year. Essentially, they turned it off pretty quickly because they had 75% of the volume contracted to run through it in terms of the concentrate. At a set price. I think they did it like $60 a ton or something. And they decided to essentially sell it straight onto the Chinese, back to back the trades, because they were going to get, what was it, negative 50 TCs on spot. So yeah, essentially like they turned the mill on, turned it straight back off. We're clipping a huge ticket on the concentrate volumes they did have secured. And I think the Indian government's like, hang on a second, we just spent all this cash trying to build this thing up and get all the infrastructure ready for it. It's time for you guys to get started. So suddenly like, oh, okay, we'll restart now.
If we have to.
If we have to. So yeah, great time for them to come back to market too, because that's actually incremental units of con that are going to have to find their way into their particular smelters very quickly. So yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. So from our perspective, look, yeah, copper remains of interest. We're really focused on things that have a US postcode. I think that trend's not going away anytime soon. So anybody that's got like a brownfield asset that's producing something niche that the US needs and can't get anywhere else, we've been running the ruler over and kicking a lot of rocks, trying to figure out what can actually come and meet the market near term. Because let's face it, like when the US rules to life, like you do not bet against it. And lots going on there at the moment. So yeah, old parts of the country that were closed for business ever since the EPA or the Environmental Protection Act was passed in the 70s. I think that's where you saw industrial production just come off a cliff. So revisiting what was alive then is now, I don't know, interesting reading at the moment for us.
Very good. What about the met coal, mate? Are you obviously focused on US over there as well, like your Peabodys, or you like in the North Queensland stuff with Whitehaven and everything?
Oh, look, I wouldn't say it's we're actively positioned in that space. I think shorter term we're a bit alert to downside risk in the met coal price. I think seasonally we're going through sort of like shoulder season or like winter.
Heard plenty of people say that one.
Like who would have ever thought that there's seasonality in SAF products, but there is.
Well, in steel, like thermal, you'd understand, but yeah.
Like gas, like trying to keep people from freezing in the northern hemisphere. Like, yeah, who would have thought that there's an element to that? But yeah,
steel,
it does happen.
Steel doesn't matter if it's summer or winter, does it? It obviously does.
Well, it does if like almost like 2 billion people sort of like pack it up every year to go on holidays. In terms of like a demand sort of disappeared. It's like Australia, like 6 weeks ago. Like, where is everyone over the Christmas New Year break? Like, they're not coming back. Like, they're away for weeks. Like, what do you want to talk about? No, it's like the 3rd of January. I'm on a beach somewhere in North America. Bugger off. Like, call us back in a little while. We're not lazy. This is our summer holidays. So yeah.
Very interesting, mate. Well, that's been sensational. I reckon I might order some takeaway tonight. You can guess which cuisine. You've inspired me, DK. Love it. I've got a good one up the road, actually.
Tikka masala, butter chicken.
Yeah,
actually,
good garlic naan there too.
Oh, mate, the naan. I tell you what, mate. Here's the weird thing. I had the greatest curry I've ever had on a domestic flight in India not so long ago.
There you go.
Like 5 out of 5. Can't believe I'm actually saying that, but yeah, when it comes to curry, they even make curries in dessert.
Yeah, what's the line up to the shitter like on the plane after having an Indian curry?
Don't fly Air India, mate. I think that's a hot tip for you. Stick to Singapore, stick to Qantas, stick to anyone that flies direct that's not in any way Indian affiliated. There's a hot tip for you.
Oh, love it, mate. Well, thank you very much for your kind time. Thank you to the Terra Capital lads for lending you to me. And I've had a bloody blast as always. Good to be back chatting to you, DK. You've made my day.
Always a pleasure, mate. Just remember that just because mum and dad got divorced doesn't mean we don't love you kids. And even with you at the new show, like we'll always love you, mum and dad, and we're always here to help you. We're we're not a step parent, but just think of it as maybe a close uncle or something. So we'll always talk to you.
I must have been the wife because I got the money.
I hope so, mate.
Right, hey, Franz. Cheers, mate.
Good to see you, mate. Thanks, mate.